afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth and final session of the Rock Center Directors College Academy. My name is Claire Bacon. I'm part of the executive education team here at Stanford Law, and I'm pleased to be with you today as we conclude this four-part series. In today's session, we'll focus on strategic oversight of today's and advanced AI. And now it's my pleasure to turn over the hosting duties to Doug Levin, our creator and the instructor of the Directors College Academy. Doug, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Claire. And welcome, everybody. This is the last class, which is you know, it's it's uh, it's sad on one level, and it's a happy time in another level because we've covered a lot of material. And I think this last class, what we're going to do is look back a little bit on some of the material that we have, but then forge forward into a whole bunch of areas that are really important for directors on boards today and um, and anybody who's in the AI industry as well as in the corporate business, um, because so many things have happened. And one of the things that was remarkable about doing this class is between classes there was so much news and so many things to talk about, and we'll touch on that in a second. One thing, though, is you should all know that I formed a company called North Star Clarity. It's a company that focuses on governance, board governance, and AI, and we are happily forging forward. And you're going to hear a number of announcements in the coming months about us. But I will be at the Directors College in June in Palo Alto in person, and I'd love to meet some of you. And if you're not going to the Directors College and you want to reach out to me, my contact information is in the left-hand side, the upper left-hand side of this slide. So you can email me at hbs at d11@hbs.edu. You can also follow a lot of these topics by following my blog, which is up on Substack. So it's douglevin.substack.com. I just covered a really interesting topic, which is a deployment ratio. And I basically broke down the math in very simple terms. And this is part of the overall kind of interaction that I do with companies on a regular basis. But you can read about it in on the Substack. So let's look back just for a second on back to February, if you can all remember. And what we started out with was a whole bunch of foundation information, and that foundation information was, about AI and foundation models and LLMs and a variety of things which percolate up to the board with respect to um, things that have been discussed, especially around the fourth quarter, as I was sitting on a couple of boards and had these issues kind of percolate up. So that translated into the first meeting. And the second meeting, we focused on the cybersecurity elements of and AI native threats specifically, which where the threat vector has expanded as a result of AI, and the types of malware has expanded accordingly, so that you have data poisoning, you have a variety of model malware which has been applied, and that includes to the Model Context Protocol, the MCP, and also later on, I believe in the last session, we talked about Mythos, which it was just announced in April. It was April 7th. Anyway, the important point is that the threat vectors have changed dramatically as a result of AI. And and while the tools have expanded to address these threats, simultaneously, the number of threats and the variety of threats have definitely expanded. I also showed you a graph which is very important that the number of exfiltrations, that is data being extracted from companies, has also increased substantially over the years as well as recently. And so data exfiltration is a key thing that we have to watch going forward. And this is a governance problem on the board. The third meeting was intended to cover a lot about economics, governance, um, as well as regulation and liability. We covered a lot about governance and regulation and liability, but unfortunately, we did not cover as much on the economic side. What I wanted to do was originally I planned to do a lot of stuff on the economic side, just going through tokens, tokenization, token math, and take the perspective of the student or the individual in the engineering department who is kind of learning how to interact with tokens um, in internal AI applications as well as external applications. And we also I was also taking the perspective of the CFO in trying to analyze um, AI run rate. We touched on it a little bit, but not nearly enough. I want to teach a class on this. So that's one of the things I plan to do in the fall or in the spring. But unfortunately, we did not go into great detail here. I also want to point out the governance situation has evolved significantly on the board. More and more boards are getting attenuated to the issues of governance, AI governance at the board level. It's partially because the directors are learning more. It's partially because there are more issues that are percolating up to the board. And then there's also the desire on the part of certain boards and certain board members to evolve boards to take in new issues and expand governance accordingly with their fiduciary responsibilities. When you think about it, when there are larger and larger AI budgets and there are more and more AI applications and models which are creating risk, there is more need for governance over that. And today we find we're going to be very strategic and talking about some wonderful areas of advanced AI. But before we dive into all that, I want to point out that the AI glossary that we handed out on the first meeting has been expanded accordingly. It's just like 3 or 4 months, and yet there's been a significant expansion in the number of both pages as well as entries into the glossary. And that glossary, version 2.0, was distributed before our call today. And so check your mail, check your spam filters just in case. Just make sure you get a copy of this because this is a very comprehensive glossary. It has everything that we covered in the class plus much more. And it also includes this session, the various things we talk about, like AI debt at the end of the session. So be sure to get a copy of this PDF and print it out, review it, bring it to a board meeting or bring it to a baseball game or some other place where you want to dive into some of these really interesting AI concepts. So in this session, the final session, a finale session, let's call it, we've got enterprise AI strategy plus the ROI considerations, AI as a competitive and an operational differentiator, and then next generation boards and governance models. Um, Talk a little bit about technology. We'll talk a little bit about the evolution in thinking about how boards should run in the future, especially given AI and empowered by AI. We'll talk a little bit about, there are not many slides on this topic, but we'll talk a little bit about some of the risks, shadow AI, AI washing and AI slop. And if you're looking at AI slop and wondering what it is, some people call it work slop, but we'll go into that later. And then we'll talk about superintelligence, guardrails, and oversight. And finally, we summarize with a bunch of takeaways and a discussion thereafter. I have left time for Q&A. So that's a very important part of this session. And so with that, I recommend that you just hold on for for some slides and just be a little bit patient and just let me go through a whole bunch of slides on the AI strategy slide and a couple of other ones. And then if you could ask questions at the end, kind of consolidate your questions at the end, that would be very helpful. So with that in mind, let's talk about strategy. Um, Increasingly, the board of directors of operating companies that are either public or private, and especially technology companies, are talking about AI strategy. They don't actually, many companies I've noticed have not built an AI strategy separately from the flow of board meetings, which have occurred this year and even last year. What happens here is that it's very helpful to have core operating strategies on the R&D side, IT, data and analytics side, as well as the product and business sides. When you take into account all these elements, what you're able to do is perhaps in an offsite or perhaps in another setting, what you're able to do is zero in on the AI, what AI can do, and or what AI could possibly do, or what would be great for the company that we should talk about that maybe AI could do. And so the reason why I'm raising all this is because I've got a case study which I'm going to share with you in just a second. And it's very illustrative. There was an outside event that caused the board and caused the company to say, we've got to do more in this area. We've got to do more AI applications. We have to do more applications of analytics driven by AI. We've got to do more application development that is AI based. The important point about this is it shouldn't take an outside shock, like COVID, for example, in this company's case, to cause a company to develop an AI strategy at the board level. So, one of the things I'm encouraging you to do as an action item is bring it up at your next board meeting or discuss it with your CEO or discuss it at the executive staff meeting. This is something that should be a regular part of your business planning. Maybe your AOP already has an AI strategy sort of built in, but building the AI strategy separately can be really, really helpful. And I'll show you through the case study how that works. The separate constituent parts of the AI strategy, of the R&D strategy, the IT strategy, the AI analytics strategy, all benefit from having let's call it an umbrella or a blanket kind of strategy, because they in turn can build on that, and there can be greater synergies realized between the AIs that are being developed internally. Because as you know, model development is very rapid and it's based on a lot of experimentation. And one of the things that can happen by knowing about all the elements of AI strategy is that with the knowledge of what else is happening in the company, you can experiment more. So the IT people can work with the analytics people, or the product people can work with the R&D people. I mean, this already happens functionally, but if you just you take this out as a action item in the strategy sessions, you realize that there are greater synergies and outcomes that can result. Well, in order to set those get those strategies and results, what you should do is start off with some goals, and the goals are based on vision alignment, values, drivers, and especially risks. When you do this at the board level, you talk about the various risks and explore the risks. And the reason why exploring the risks are very important is because, as we've seen with security, especially, but also a variety of other areas like compliance and like data and analytics, as we'll see at the end of this presentation, it's really important to get those risks out and kind of out of off the cupboard and into the mainstream thinking of boards. And then the final piece is this adoption topic has been constant in all the board members or board meetings that I've attended and all the projects I've done with boards. So these six things: vision, alignment, value, drivers, risks, and adoption are the things which should drive your AI strategy. So that leads to a board question. You remember the last three sessions, we had multiple questions. This is a key one. Are you and your company ready for the next generation of intelligent business? I'm not suggesting you answer right now, but think about it. Jot it down and perhaps raise it at the next board meeting. And that brings us to Nike. This is the little case study that I put together based on HBS case studies and also based on knowledge of the company, as well as just being a fan of the brand and just and then reading about the brand for years and years. This is really important instance of a board reacting to COVID. And the reason why is because when you look at this, Nike did something very, very important in reaction to COVID. They closed half their stores, which at the time were 1,100 stores worldwide. And when you think about that, that could, COVID dramatically affected revenues for all companies. But some companies in particular, because if you had a high amount of human interface, it's going to affect those companies especially. And retail, of course, was dramatically impacted. They closed 1,100 stores, but simultaneously, from a board meeting, the message went out and the strategy was implemented to supplement the company's um, digital strategy and specifically AI strategy. So just to give you an idea of like who Nike is, revenues of 46 billion in fiscal year 25, and I believe fiscal year ended at the end of May, so May 31st. Their most recent quarterly revenue was $12 billion, which was 1% over the previous quarter, gross margins of 21%, and they operate today 1,300 or 1,034 stores. You'll remember what I said earlier. They closed a bunch of stores. Now, most of those were temporary. More than 500 stores were closed. And some of them were temporary, but some of them were permanent, and then they built it back up. And this year, there are 11 fewer stores, but that's in the course of business. Nike closes stores. There are 78,000 employees today. And Nike's AI strategy looks like this. There is proprietary data, which they've accumulated for many years and worked on the data. There's a CDO at Nike whose job is to take care, generate the data, take care of the data, expand the use of the data. Very broad um, slate of things that this person does. Then there are digital memberships and loyalty programs, mobile engagement. I'm sure everybody, many of the people on this webinar have used Nike.com, but you have also maybe received texts or ads about Nike. This is a company that shifted as a result of COVID and became much more mobilely engaged because people were using their mobile phones at home, working out of home, or they were remote. And this was the way they could engage more in the absence of having stores. Then they worked on their operating. This is all simultaneously, by the way. These different triangles or pyramid-like objects are meant to be actually separate, but they're also integrated. And the operating infrastructure was it's like building a plane while it's flying. Nike did a great job in building out its operating infrastructure to accommodate this new digital business. And personalization was a big part of this, as you'll see in one or two slides. It's really important that you understand that AI is central to personalization. When you pass a store, you get a text, and that text is about your interests. It doesn't it Like, for example, I'm not interested in golf. I know that's heresy, but I don't really like golf. But I love five or six other sports. And to be able to get the texts that I want rather than the texts that are kind of imposed on me, that's a really important thing, and personalization is part of that. And then supply chain intelligence is something that Nike built in. They had a lot of catching up to do there. So let's first look at a couple of elements of Nike's strategy. Those elements included the operating infrastructure that facilitated um, all these AI applications. It included product design, forecasting, marketing, logistics, and customer engagement. If you can't see those bubbles on the left-hand side under operating infrastructure. Um, these five different entities had in and of itself AI applications, as you'll see with the other subsequent bubbles. The other part of this, which is really important, is that the operating infrastructure knew a lot about some of the other initiatives that were going on simultaneously because they did a really wonderful job of cross informing the various groups. So the D2C group um, basically were informing the operating infrastructure, as was the demand forecasting and the analytics groups on the supply chain side. And as a result, the operating infrastructure made accordant evolutionary changes in infrastructure in practically real time. And much of this was as a result of being cloud centric before COVID, but expanding their use of the cloud very significantly during COVID and then subsequently after COVID to accommodate more and more AI. The direct to consumer is really, really interesting because while Nike was a DTC kind of company, before COVID, they increased their share of DTC substantially as a result of the AI that they introduced during COVID, and then subsequently increased it even more. This helped their margins. So those monstrous margins that Nike enjoy is not only because they produce shoes in low cost areas, but they also have shifted the way their business works. And they're more DTC today than ever before. And then on the analytical side, they were using all kinds of AI tools to do forecasting and supply chain management and analytics. And then on the personal side, this to me is kind of wonderful because this is these two things in particular, personalization and the Nike Fit, are wonderful uses of AI. And there are equivalent uses in your business. You may not sell shoes and you may not sell Air Jordans and you may not have a personal commerce or a membership opportunity, but you may have applications of these in your businesses. So I chose Nike because it's a very simple, straightforward case to be able to analyze. But when you think about personalization, this is browsing behavior. This is purchasing history. This is sizing patterns. This is workout activity and data. This is geographical preferences. So you may not run a Nike-like business, but you may be able to personalize it when you drill down and you identify these areas of analytics that you could identify and apply AI to. But the application to AI, which was requisite because everybody else is doing it, or we're about to do it, and requisite because Nike's shoe line is so complicated now and requires this added enhancement through AI sizing that Nike can now take smartphones through the camera capabilities in smartphones, scan the customer's feet, apply machine learning to predict the precise size of this shoe and reduce return rates and increase customer confidence. When this was introduced, Nike customers went nuts. They flipped out. Because for one thing, they like going to stores because it's an experience, just like the Apple Store is an experience in its own way. But Nike, to be able to buy a pair of Nike shoes, just in case you've got a basketball game on the weekend, or perhaps because you've got a golf game on the weekend, if you're so inclined. Or if you wanted, or if you have a running race, you've got a marathon coming up in a couple of months, and you just simply didn't want to go to the store, or you live remotely. Let's say you lived in Montana, or you lived in uh, some other state where there's no Nike store, which is readily available. What you could do is order with confidence through the Nike app and size up the Nike shoe you want and get it delivered to you. And there's a very high probability that that shoe comes and it's the right fit. These kind of capabilities may not exactly fit your business. In all probability, it doesn't because there's only one Nike and there are not many shoe companies on that I noticed who pre-registered for this course. However, you may have a similar application, either on personalization side or commerce or a membership, a loyalty program like membership, or some other applications. And the reason why this case is fitting, pardon the pun, is because intelligent sizing, matching, and fit reduce decision friction and improve the precision of the sales. AI is a important instrument that I hope as a result of this class and specifically this presentation, that you start thinking in a larger sense about its various applications. And to that end, I just cited a couple of them outside of outside of Nike and outside of the pure tech industry. So in healthcare, diagnostic support and image recognition. In Boston, we've got a company that came out of HBS and MIT Sloan, which analyzes dentistry X-rays and has reduced the incidence of cancer by 60% because it's picked up instances of cancer that the dentist missed with his own eyes, or the dental assistant who was analyzing the X-rays. And so AI has increased diagnostic support and image recognition in dentistry as well as many other areas of healthcare. You may not be fully aware of this, but your X-rays, MRIs, and various other scans are now increasingly being diagnosed by AI. There is a human in the loop, there's Hiddle. However, in healthcare today, we have a lot of instances of AI in use. Megan Sutherland. Sorry about that. And so what you get is a lot of instances, not only in healthcare, but also manufacturing. Predictive tolerances and quality inspection are now increasingly across the manufacturing sectors being enhanced by AI. In real estate, property management, and pricing precision. There is a company that I know in downtown Boston that has increased its productivity of matching people who are looking for distressed properties on a nationwide basis by adding AI to its solution. They were a SaaS company. They're now an AI company, even though they call themselves AI native, but technically they're not. They are AI first though, and they have increased the matching very, very significantly on on getting people who are looking for who are interested in purchasing distressed properties. And then HR. I'm sure many of you, have already seen the enhancement to AI that comes from adding generative AI to HR staff's involvement with recruiting, as well as personnel assessments, as well as just simple communications. And here, I think HR has been one of the great beneficiaries of AI. And then finally, on the automotive side, just walk around any major car company, and especially the Teslas and the other related brands, Rivian, and you'll see how much AI is being used. In fact, it's worth a special trip to the automobile dealer, your local dealership, just to walk around and see all the instances of AI that's being used for diagnosis purposes, diagnostics that is, in maintenance and services. But in addition to that, in their sales processes, as well as in other processes in their office. So AI usage from a board level. This is coming up in every board meeting that I'm seeing. It is absolutely amazing how AI usage has expanded from negligible to significant in board discussions. Adoption has crossed the strategic threshold. That's one of the reasons why it's a board level. But in addition to it, scaling is a really important issue on the board. You have a little bit of AI today, and you see the benefits and the productivity, and you definitely want to have more AI in the future. So, some of the more mature use cases are in the IT and service automation area, knowledge search and research areas, analytics and forecasting, software development and productivity. Without question, if your software development is not using AI in one form or another, that's an issue. But there's a high probability that almost every software engineering group, especially on this call, but also across the country, is using AI to one extent or another to either doing programming or debugging or many other things. And then finally, in the marketing area and content generation area, huge, huge productivity gains are being seen through AI. Most of this stuff so I'm not going to dwell on it. The agentic workflows and autonomous task orchestration is something we've discussed. I think it was both the first and second sessions. Agents are going to be increasingly dominating the AI discussion in the coming months and years, partially because of the productivity gains, partially because of the management needs, and finally because of the security related issues. ROI is positive but uneven. This is part of the jagged frontier that we went over, the jagged technology frontier, if you remember from the last class. This is a really important concept. It's the So it's not only knowledge that is that the jagged frontier forms, but it's also ROI. So in a company like, oh, I don't know this for sure, but a company like Nike, where there are six major initiatives and somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 sub initiatives of AI, there are going to be some that return investment quicker than others. It's that simple. And part of the unevenness is related to um, development skills, cognitive skills, application skills, and timing. The timing of these applications of AI is sometimes really related to, you know, being late. And sometimes it's a matter of iteration interfering with final analysis. And sometimes it's other issues. And we'll go into those in a second. The investment momentum remains extremely strong. I mean, uh, every company out there is not just investing, but they're investing a great deal in AI. And what that means is spending the salaries that are necessary. The majority of organizations report measurable efficiency gains and customer improvements, et cetera. But um, the transition from experimentation is a very important issue. And the structural constraints slowing valuable or value realization is another issue. So here, the primary barriers are data quality. You have heard me say that the American corporation, as in general, more so than Europe, I would say, um, uh, came to believe in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s that their data was perfect. And all of a sudden, in the once the internet, hit in the late 90s and early 2000s, it became increasingly aware, many people became increasingly aware that their data was not perfect. And then over a period of time, as SaaS was introduced and the cloud was introduced, it became increasingly important, now more so than ever. AI is exposing data quality and accessibility more so than any time in history. And the reason why is because the vaulted data warehouses, data lakes, and other data storage areas had all kinds of problems connected to it. Empty cells, empty, uh, like literally flawed data with parentheses and question marks and all kinds of stuff in there. Data quality in American corporations is not as high as you would think, and that has affected our ability to be productive in AI. The governance gap is also an emerging board risk. I have heard many boards saying we have to do better on the governance side of AI. And shadow AI is certainly one of the main issues, but it's not the only issue. There are many other issues. There's IP leakage. We've covered all this. IP leakage and security. There's model accuracy and explainability. There's regulatory exposure, which we covered in the last class. Vendor concentration risk, which we covered in every class. We talk about this, and we'll talk about it a little more later. And then there's AI cost run rate visibility. And this goes to the whole issue of AI run rate and AI ROI. But in the end, the more AI you have, the higher the, the business differentiator you'll have. So that means product differentiation, customer experience, like the Nike sizing application, the operational efficiencies, the data advantage, the trust, in the importance of the ecosystem, read partnerships, and the importance of brand. Increasingly on the board level, you will be asked to talk about the level of AI in your brand. Now, this is not just a CMO's decision. This is a board level decision. But with that, you've got to improve your board governance and specifically understand the risks associated with being more of an AI-led company. So let's ask another set of questions. Two ROI questions for board level consideration. How do you measure ROI on AI investments? What time horizon should the board expect? Let me just make a comment here. AI ROI is one of the raging topics among people in finance, FP&A, F&A, FG&A, all G&A, all the various areas where measurements occur. It is also a raging topic at the board level. What kind of considerations should you have for ROI? The value hypothesis per use case. That's a really important consideration. The credible baseline of for the ROI. Where do you start? And then the counterfactual. Then we've got revenue uplift, cost reduction, productivity and risk reduction as buckets to monetize and affect the the cost side and the revenue side. Then there's capturing the full cost. So AI total cost of ownership, or TCO, is an issue. There are a lot of people that who want to identify all the burden on TCO. It's not just the model spent. It's more than that. And it's, of course, infrastructure and the general infrastructure. There are many other things about AI that affect its introduction into the company. So use standard finance outputs so they're comparable, and track value realization, and especially for you VC-oriented companies or companies with multiple AI implementation, think of it from a portfolio point of view. So then we get to this issue of AI debt, which is coming up frequently in board meetings. There are three reasons AI debt is a problem for companies and boards. One is fiduciary and legal exposure. The second thing is it compounds silently and erodes the economics of the AI investments that companies make. And it concentrates third-party and data governance risks into one metric. So AI debt has a variety of categories. Just yesterday, I went through a presentation and we talked about 18 different instances of AI debt. But it comes down to this. This is something that the board should consider because it impacts fiduciary and legal exposure. As we discussed last time, there is liability connected to AI. As we discussed last time, there are regulatory changes which are happening today. We mentioned all the executive office memorandums coming out of the White House. They are not stopping. There was one in the last month or so. And of course, agencies are putting out their policy papers. So there is exposure that you have, not to mention the fact that Europe is very actively trying to regulate AI. So the 7 forms of debt are technical debt. I'll go over this in a second, but let me just name them. Number 1, technical debt. Number 2, data debt. Number 3, organizational and human capital debt. Number 4 is governance, regulatory debt. then there is societal and cognitive debt, then there is financial debt and security debt. Technical debt is the best known because AI debt on the technical side looks very similar to IT related technical debt that it was frequently calculated in the past. Data debt has been has been often referenced in the past, but it's increasingly being pressed at the board level because the question is the data good? Do we have good data? And the quick answer is yes, but the real answer is we don't exactly have the best data. And so this is something that needs to be measured in companies. Then there's organization and human capital debt. This is simply almost every company is running into either AI knowledge shortage or capabilities in companies to be able to implement AI. So to this end, and this is even among the engineers. So there are some engineers that are really great at this and really knowledgeable, and there's some engineers that are simply not. So on this side, measurements are extremely important. There are a number of companies that are doing this kind of measurement of AI capabilities. There's on the governance and regulatory side, there is no question about it. There is missing oversight. And this is something that just needs to be cycled into board meetings. And there needs to be more education of board members on AI, and especially the governance and regulatory sides of AI. Cognitive debt is increasingly coming up as a singular issue when you look from a board level. This is what this means is there information out in the company? Is there AI education that is occurring? Is there not just basic AI education, but also much deeper education beyond basics? So, medium as well as advanced AI education are necessary in any company of a significant size to address this cognitive debt issue. And then there's financial debt. Now, here, this is really interesting. I worked with a company recently that basically looks like a company that is 10 to 15 years out of date from an IT standpoint. And their AI investment is so far behind. And the only AI they had was what people in the company were willing to use. And there were like three AIs, generative AIs in use. And, like that was individual use that determined the AI level of a company that should have been using extensive use of AI. So their AI debt was gargantuan. I suspect that based on what I know about the people who have registered for this class, I suspect the AI debt from a finance standpoint or financial debt is not as bad as that company that I just described. However, using that company as an instance, there are a lot of times where, like there are other priorities, like security, for example, that just simply have gone ahead of others of AI funding. So just keep in mind that financial debt is another form of AI debt. And then finally, there's security debt. This is dramatic. I think it was Gardner who just said that all companies should double their security budgets this year. And the truth is that the expanded threat vectors are a very important indicator of how this security situation, the threat vectors have expanded. The threat debt is a real thing. And so with that in mind, Let me stop and see whether or not there are any questions. Q&A. Thank you. Isn't Nike getting impacted due to the DTC pivot, which gutted wholesale relationships? As I, I don't really know the answer to that question, so um, sorry about that. Isn't consistent sizing more of a manufacturing consistency issue? It's partially that. It's partially, Cynthia, it's partially an issue of the initial, just so you know, um, a whole bunch of jean companies were one of the first clothing companies to go into AI sizing. And some of their first instances of tools to do AI sizing for jeans were horrible. There were so many returns that they were very unhappy. Well, the companies were very unhappy as well as customers unhappy with the results. So the it's more than a manufacturing issue. It is a manufacturing issue, but it's more than that. It comes down to the that's being used at the customer level on the phone, so smart applications. Can you comment on the board of directors' use of AI to review company content and prep for meetings? We're just about to go into that. So, great question. What risk might there be in introducing this? Good question. How do you define AI debt? Um, I apologize if I didn't do it sufficiently in the slides. AI debt in general is many different measurements of where individual companies assess their own level of AI usage relative to competition, relative to their own aspirations, relative to customer needs, relative to other measures, such as some of the research that's coming out on an industry basis. So AI debt are measurements which say that there is a shortcoming in the amount of AI that you're using. It's bigger than that, but let's suffice it to say that that's it. What about the liability each director could incur into that's by using non-confidential infrastructure with AI models when analyzing BOD documents to prepare a BOD meeting? Sometimes docs are specifically sensitive and become public somehow during such an analysis. Okay, interesting question, Maria. First and foremost, you should make everybody who is on this call should go back to their chief legal officer or chief financial officer and ask whether or not their D&O insurance, the insurance for directors and officers, are current with the advent of AI. That is to say, your insurance, there's been changes in insurance. And E&O is the primary way, and D&O and E&O are the primary ways boards and officers and companies deal with these kind of liability issues. That's point number one. Point number two is at the board level, you should be analyzing risk of everything that is a major risk that is posed to the company. This is, this is a standard operating practice of the board. Now, it may happen in committees and then rolled up. It may happen in offsites, in strategic sessions. It may happen in all kinds of ways. But what's really important to understand is that we've got a changing landscape. Every day, the landscape change, every minute it changes, it's seemingly. So, I mean, when you look at Mythos from Anthropic, the latest model from Anthropic, you can understand how important this is. If you're running a security company, especially an AppSec company, you should be really aware of Mythos and how it may impact your business. So it's a business impact, but it's also the threat vector that these companies will now have. I mean, Mythos basically uncovered all kinds of threats that have been lodged in all this old software. I think Berkeley Unix had they I think Mythos uncovered a bug in Berkeley Unix, which I believe is somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 years old. I mean, it predates I can't even remember when it was, but I remember at Black Duck we vetted out that. Vetting is not enough. Today, there is all kinds of surreptitious malware that's in there, but I don't want to get too far into the cybersecurity consequences of it. It just goes back. Your question is a very good question, and it goes to the whole issues of boards assessing risk, confidential data and as well as all kinds of board slides being reviewed by generative AIs is a risk that every board should identify. And having a sand pit or a means by which you first vet out the generative AI application before it's in general use and sequester the data for the generative AI is one of many solutions that need to be implemented. The board needs to have an approved applications list, which include a choice of generative AI. I mean, some of our friends have selected Anthropic Claude, and some of our friends on boards have selected ChatGPT, and some have. I just came from a company that selected, Copilot. The real smart boards are balancing off select multiple ones and invest in generative AIs. So they have at least two. Anyway, the important point here is keeping that confidential is a IT function that is necessary and should be assessed on the board level. Thank you for the compliment, Sophia. Lockie, I think I'm pronouncing the person's name right. Let's see. What are the thoughts about use of generative AI to review board docs before meetings? Seems there's a need to make sure board members are not using apps platforms for board prep that would open the absolutely. This is a risk. This could open up the board to liability. I mean, there's a range of things that could happen, but this is IT working with the board and getting an approved a generative AI applications list, and then putting in place all the supporting structures that are necessary. Like, for example, a no use list, a black hat list where you can't use the applications, such as DeepSeek. And then there's a white label list. I said black hat. I meant black label. Sorry about that. So there's a black label list, and then there's a white label list. The white label lists are permitted applications, like, for example, it could be Claude, and it could be specifically Opus 4.5, or it could be ChatGPT 5.4. The important point is your IT can reinforce this, because it's got to be reinforced, because people have personal machines, they have mobile machines, and this is going to be tested. So go back to your boards and discuss this. Okay, now let's jump into the future of boards. The next generation board is going to be data driven. What you see on the right could easily be up on a board monitor or on Zoom or on your dedicated it could be on your mobile phone. The important point is data-driven oversight is a thing of today. If you're not thinking about this as a standard, you are years behind. That's the AI debt for board governance. If you're not thinking about data-driven oversight at the board level, you're not thinking about what's needed today and what's needed in the future at the board level. What it will also introduce is not only sharper decision, but agile decision making, meaning you can jump around and combine things and come up with really interesting conclusions. So, does everyone remember the token window that we went over in, I believe it was the first session, and that there's a billion tokens that can be accommodated in the Claude. I can't remember the release of Claude, but the Claude token window, 1 billion tokens can translate into 152 moderately sized BOD decks, board decks. So can you imagine loading that up into, let's say, Claude, and then using Claude to find out DSO for the last 3 board meetings? Has it varied? Or last 10 board meetings? This is where AI can be really helpful. This is where real-time data decisions can be made. I mean, the analytics on the board, never mind the AI-powered analytics, but the questions that are asked and the possible outcomes, which can be asked at the board level, can be really insightful. And so having an AI-powered board is not just a thing of the future, it's something needed today. And then separately, the cybersecurity resilience and focus is something you can monitor at the board level. Next generation boards can have all the data in front of you about data exfiltrations, about number of malware instances found, about all the flags that have been red flags that have been answered by the CISO's department. Think about the board as a much more real-time analytical engine that looks into some of the challenges the company has, such as cybersecurity challenges. And then there's stakeholder intelligence. It's not just one board meeting. It's multiple board meetings and the engagement of a board member over a long period of time. What we know is board members get smarter over time. Well, if you have AI to back up the board member, they're going to be even smarter over time. And so stakeholder intelligence is super important, but it also facilitates communications between the board and the e-staff or the executive staff of the company. Being able to get real-time data is something that is really not just helpful in boards, but outside board meetings when board members run into some issue and they want to get insight into it. And then tracking governance is in and of itself. Remember, the audit committee needs documentation and auditable results, an audit trail of results. And here, AI can be really helpful in reinforcing and expanding the tracking of auditable results. And finally, next generation boards will be more ethical and more collaborative with the underlying infrastructure that's there and the use of digital solutions. what do next generation boards look like, or board technologies look like? Well, to the right, you're going to see a whole bunch of KPIs and other measurements from, real-time performance dashboards to, board intelligence dashboards to risk and compliance monitoring to board operations data and statistics to intelligence platforms that board members can access anywhere on Earth at any time. So when a board member is really remote, like calling in from Paris, like I recently did for one board meeting, they can be really smart, but remote. Maybe not smart in my case, but the truth of the matter is you can be really remote and really uh, have a lot of information accessible. So what that means is um, this means also potentially exploring the new frontiers of board technologies, such as blockchain voting and blockchain decision records. Blockchain is increasingly being used to store board information and making it quite accessible to people who are remote, as well as people who understand that the security levels are quite high for the blockchain. So, with that said, let's go into the wild world of superintelligence. Before I jump into this, I really want to say one thing that AI hype is a dangerous thing, and saying that superintelligence is within grasping distance is not healthy for companies. A superintelligence, or AGI, is something which means basically that machines are programming themselves and using data themselves to come up with solutions and thinking for themselves. I mean, it's a well-worn expression or reference or cultural reference, but Terminator, I believe it's the Terminator series in general, but the Terminator 1 through 4 was based on machines, AI machines, basically thinking for themselves and making strategic decisions. We are we are years away from this. Some people who are trying to hype their companies are saying that superintelligence is within grasping distance, that AGI may be even sooner. Anyway, it's important to know that there are capacity limits to superintelligence. There is all kinds of restrictions that you can implement. There's self-modification and there's tool access that can be implemented. These are things that boards need to discuss today because boards, simply speaking, need to be ahead of the curve and at least be educated about it before they become a reality. There's human controls and shutdowns which are necessary before superintelligence and AGI are implemented. There are all kinds of legal and ethical compliance issues which need to be discussed. And then there is governance and oversight, governance by the board, oversight by individuals in the company and the board. All of these things about are guardrails which simply need to be discussed at the board level increasingly. So plan on discussing it this year. So what I did by way of summary is to put together a punch list of things that you should keep in mind about AI governance. This is not in order of priority, and it's just order of this is just all the things you're just simply going to have to do. Establish an oversight structure. That is to say, talk about what you want to oversee at the board level. Inventory, classify risks, as we did in the first session or second session, enumerating the risks and analyzing the risks that are specific to your business. Define acceptable use. What that means is define the applications that company staff can use and board members can use. That limitation is going to help you a great deal in putting measures in place to limit the downside of implementing more and more AI. Then there's governance controls, specifically around data. This should be something that will benefit the company, not stand in the way of more and more data use. Talk about it at the board level. Vendor and procurement discipline is a related AI use because once you open up your APIs, that is standard supply chain APIs as well as other application APIs, and you open up your networks to communicate with your vendors and procurement partners, you basically open yourself up to cybersecurity issues as well as other liabilities potentially. And the risk management should be, toward the top of this list of things to consider at the board level. Compliance and legal alignment, I don't have to tell this audience how important that is. You are attending this in part because you are concerned about these issues. Many of you are lawyers. Many of you have attended Stanford, and many of you have attended supplemental legal classes or classes, law classes that just address a variety of issues, including compliance, if you're a regulated industry. Then there's the workforce enablement issues, which is basically the board needs to properly fund the AI budget so that the engineers get enough AI tools and the non-engineers get the AI tools that they need. Once again, the company that I saw that's way out of date in the use of AI tools as well as just generally IT, they were not doing their workforce a service. This needs to be analyzed. Companies can get out of date very easily. It's not just, the extreme companies that are 10 years, 15 years out of date. We're talking about companies that are literally a couple of years out of date, and it may be affecting productivity and it may be affecting their competitiveness. And then monitor and audit, especially around the issues of quantitative measures like AI ROI, AI debt, AI run rate, the cost of running AI on a current basis. And then these issues of trust, hard to tackle, but necessary. So with that, let's run through a whole bunch of takeaways. This is the end of the class. Regrettably, this is our last class. This is one of the last subjects we're going to cover. And so it's very important that you grasp that we covered these things and you realize how important they are. Okay, AI is now a strategic business and governance issue. At the board, AI needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed as a strategic issue as well as a governance issue. AI introduces new governance challenges. Governance in the form of measuring the impact of AI on the business and also measuring the shortfalls that results of not having enough AI or having the wrong AI or making mistakes with AI. All that requires measurements. Those measurements are a board level governance issue, but it also means oversight of HITL and ADL, the implementation of human in the loop versus AI in the loop. This is a governance challenge to be able to communicate that and to communicate what kind of company you want. Boards must oversee the AI through a lens of strategy, risk, economics, and culture. I mean, that sentence kind of captures what the board needs to do with respect to AI. Um, and culture, don't underestimate the impedance that culture presents a company with. That is to say, culture may create greater impedance or reluctance to implement or friction to implement than you can believe or can measure today. When you think about your company and you think that the culture is so supportive, and then you're seeing delays in AI implementation, it may be due to culture. Data quality is completely underestimated in US companies. Data governance is not well done. Operational readiness to data in AI applications is also underestimated. So, to get long-term value out of AI, you need to address the quality, governance, and operational readiness in order to get the most out of it. ROI from AI is a discipline measure, but it's hard to do. Um, I mean, one recommendation is to just hire an outside firm that's an expert on it and help you build it. Another recommendation is roll your own and see how far you get. And if you're not satisfied with the results, that's when you bring in an outside firm. AI debt is an imminent problem for companies and boards. I say this with total objectivity. I just see it all the time. There's technical debt, remember? There's data debt, and there's governance debt, and there's cybersecurity debt. Those are the top AI debts which are occurring that boards need to address. Then there's the competitive advantage of embedding AI into whatever you're doing, products, operations, decision making. Decision making is a hard thing, and that's where the cultural impedance comes in. A lot of people would just want to make a decision in the absence of AI. A lot of people want to make decisions with more AI. And then there's certain decisions that lend itself readily to AI that you just need to talk about and implement. These are something that just require a lot of work and discussion. Governance maturity will increasingly differentiate successful organizations from laggards. Let me repeat this if you didn't realize what I just said. Governance maturity will increasingly differentiate successful organizations from laggards. Much of the stuff that we did in this class is about basically addressing this, making you a successful organization. You implement this at the board level, there's a higher probability that the company will benefit and be more successful. The next generation boards will rely on real-time intelligence, digital oversight, and AI native governance practices. Let me repeat that. The next generation boards will rely on real-time intelligence, that is data that's being fed in real time and presented on dashboards and influenced or facilitated by AI. Digital oversight, which is data that's being transformed into analytics and presented in dashboards for board use. And finally, governance practices that are driven by AI. Those elements will make next generation boards much more resilient to threats and much more capable of helping the business and making the business much more successful. So, with the time remaining, let's go to a couple of other questions. Let me see. Maria, you're all over the place, aren't you? Comprehensive answer, Claude, Opus 4.7, ChatGPT, both support. Okay. Stephen, thank you very much for pointing out that Claude, Opus 4.7, and ChatGPT 5.5 both support 1 million tokens in their context windows. Not 1 billion. Okay. Absolutely right. If I said billion, I apologize. Um, so what's important about this is it's really big and it's increased substantially over the last couple of months. Will it increase more? Absolutely. Is the token window um, extremely, or context window, is that one of the areas of cybersecurity threat and also data security threat? Absolutely. These are all things which kind of come together. All the issues kind of vector in. Sophia asks, when recent Delaware judgment in Fortis Advisors versus ChatGPT logs and other LLMs now effectively fall into the same category of ESI. Most Delaware governance firms stated that AI generated governance materials can potentially be discoverable corporate records. Absolutely. You should assume that. I mean, even before this judgment in Fortis Advisors, LLC versus Crafton, um, you should just assume that it's discoverable. It's sort of like the board, especially VC boards, I think are very careful about this. But non-VC boards and public boards may not be fully aware of it. Um, that's not an unequivocally correct uh, question point of view, but um, so basically, this is what I know. You've got to be careful about what using closed networks is one thing. Using generative AI is another thing. Generative AI, and also given the history of generative AI, remember, generative AI basically sent out all these web crawlers across the web in order to train their initial, do their pre-training of their LLMs, and then subsequently sent out more web crawlers to increase the the data in their in the trained uh, portion of their LLMs. It's important to note that LLMs, the use of generative AI, may result in data leakage, and you don't want data leakage, and you do not want IP leakage either. The example that we gave last session was the Coke formula. Some well-meaning MBA at Coke put the Coke formula into generative AI. I don't know the details, but and they were trying to improve the Coke formula by putting in its generative AI. Not a good idea. Don't do that. Could you talk about governance of AI agents and where the accountability falls with your autonomous actions? Is the agent or the agent orchestrator? What is the role of the agent identity schemes? Fascinating question. Eventually, there will be governance agents available to companies that oversee agents. Today, the agents that are available are just not capable of overseeing other agents and providing the proper governance? So, one answer is the combination of humans and other governance measures. One answer is the combination of humans, other governance measures, and specifically agents that govern agents. So, agents that oversee agents is currently an application that you can build yourself. You build an application to, book flights on uh, Southwest, and you change it to, um, or I'm sorry, what's the airline that just went out of business? Anyway, you let's say you build agents to book only on JetBlue, and um, someone changes it to booking it on American and United. You should have a agent monitoring that agent to mitigate that change. Um, so where does it reside? It resides at the agent orchestrator. And what is the role of agent identity schemes? Well, there's so many of them. Uh, Basically, what you implement. So let me explain what's behind that. Agents are an identity. They're like another human almost. So overseeing an agent is like overseeing another identity. Ascribing an identity to an agent is a very important part of monitoring the agents. So the role of agent identity schemes, which oversees agents, are critical, and putting together an architecture that includes orchestrator and identities, agent identities, is a critical part of oversight, as well as just general maintenance and monitoring and optimization. Uh, Lockie said, fantastic list related to my Nike question. Is AI best governed under audit, nominations, governance, or some other committee? Curious how these cross-functional AI initiatives are governed at the board level. Okay, excellent question. I basically answered this, I excuse me, I think at the first meeting. And increasingly, the audit committee is responsible. Well, I shouldn't say increasingly. Um, Over the last year, I noticed that a lot of boards use the audit committee to audit AI, but also increasingly there is an AI committee that is being, excuse me, introduced to companies and has board level exposure to either the general board meetings or the or audit committee, or the best way is both. So the answer is, in your company, make sure there's an audit committee that either has AI expertise, or, well, definitely AI practitioners, AI expertise, potentially board members, and also um, operating officers and related people. Cross-functional AI initiatives have to be governed at the board at some point. Not all companies are initiating governed, uh, cross business unit and cross, um, you know, related kind of initiatives. So it's on a company by company basis, but years from now, what's going to happen is the board will govern many of these, if not most of these initiatives. Do you think enough companies are taking the impact of culture on AI adoption and implementation into consideration? So this is the last question, and what I'll say is the answer is unequivocally no. Boards have never been the best of all places to really take into consideration the operating culture of the company, especially as it gets vast or gets bigger and scales and then gets vast. I mean, this is hard. This is hard stuff. This is really hard to do, but it's necessary. And I think um, the board just needs to take into account the cultural issues in implementing AI. And that is it. I want to thank you all for participating and your attention. Thanks also to everybody at the Directors College for supporting me in this class. I really enjoyed this class in part because getting exposure to many of you and your questions, and especially getting exposure to the Directors College folks is so refreshing and so great. And I look forward to doing more classes, and especially the second version of this class next year. So hang on. I'm sure there'll be announcements of this later, but just to be clear, there'll be more. I, I hope there'll be more coming from the Directors College and from Stanford on the related topics that we covered today. Thanks again. See you next time, and hope to see you at the Directors College.